Welcome everybody to U of Man Live. My name is Tim. Tonight we have a full panel to ask questions of our esteemed guest, Mark Fiorentino. Mark Fiorentino is the master of reality. He is a metaphysician, and he is an author. Please welcome Mark.
Hey, welcome. So glad to
Hello.
have you.
Thank you.
Okay, tonight we're going to get into some very deep discussions about Einstein's theories, the unified field theory, super relativity, and the connection with aliens to all of that. Also, possibly touch upon near-death experiences and their connection to the ether and their connection to the unified field theory. So, without further ado, let's bring Mark up full screen, and we'll go from there. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about your fields of study and how you first got into them?
It started at the age of 10 when I was told by my catechism class nun to look up a saint born on my birthday. It was 1965. All I had available was the calendar on the wall of my parents and an encyclopedia, which was hard to look up on dates or whatever. I couldn't find a saint born on my birthday, but I did see on the calendar Einstein's name. So I went to the encyclopedia, looked him up, started reading about him and the unified field theory, and I was hooked right from that day. I said, this is the most interesting man and the most interesting thing I've ever read. And from that point on, I was involved with science and it was my favorite subject in school. I always did well in it. And that's how I got into it. Later on, I got interested in UFOs and recognized pretty early on, he says, well, they're using anti-gravity. So that's a new force, kind of a different type of gravity. So that has to be rolled into the unified field theory. And so from then on in, I was always watching, reading, and studying anything that could, give me clues as to how UFOs work. So that's basically very short, compacted version of how I got into the study of UFOs, unified field theory, and how anti-gravity works.
Right. I was going to ask you, don't you have the same birthday as Einstein?
Yes. Yeah. I was born. Not only that, but I lived in a town called Middlesex, New Jersey, which was only 20 miles away from Princeton. So I was born about 36 days before Einstein died. He died in the hospital the same year I was born. We just missed each other.
Oh,
It was, I was 36 days old and he had passed away. My parents took me to Princeton when I got older. They were taking me to Ivy League schools, and I wasn't sure why until my brothers told me many years later that I scored extraordinarily high on my tests at grade school, and the school told them that, I was a gifted child or whatever. So that's why my parents were taking me to Ivy League schools when I was 10 years old, trying to get me to see the campuses and get excited about going to college.
yeah.
But, we have the same birthday.
So that would be March 14th, correct?
Pi Day, yeah.
Well, just to let you know something, I was born on March 13th.
So
There's
close.
a lot of us Pisces kind of people all around. There's a whole bunch, 14, 15 in my family now. So there's others as well that are born right in that little period, mid-March.
Okay, Nicole.
Yes. Hi, Mark. I what's that?
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I've read a couple of your papers and publications and things that you have recently kind of updated. Can you give everybody kind of a brief explanation on the unified theory and like Einstein's theory, how that I've read the books. I've had to go back and read them quite a few times to give that explanation. But the way you do it is absolutely beautiful. So I thought I'd let you have that opportunity.
It's the most asked question I have on these shows, and it's the most relevant thing because it's the guiding light to all the work that I've done. And so for unified field theory, as Einstein first imagined it, there was electromagnetism and gravity emerge as aspects of a single fundamental field, so that space itself is that fundamental field. And before the year 1905, it was called the ether. And people had gone even further and not just this thing called the ether, they defined it as a quasi-elastic solid. So this fundamental field, quasi-elastic solid means quasi meaning that if I hold a magnet out in space, the space will adapt and bend into the shape of the magnetic field. I pull it away, I snap it back, the field snaps back into a Euclidean grid. So it's quasi. Elastic means it can be deformed. It can be twisted and pulled and contracted in slight variations. The field itself is not moving. It's stationary, but it can be bent different ways. And so particles going through it are configurations of the field. So as the particle moves through space, the electromagnetic field, the space adapts and snaps into that shape as it's moving through space. So that's how electromagnetism and gravity emerge as an aspect of that fundamental field, because gravity is a contraction of space. Electrostatic charges are twists of space, and a magnetic field is a rotation of the moving charge as it goes through space. All of this is meshed together into one theory now called the theory of superrelativity. So I believed Einstein was right. I followed his path and completed the work in one of those papers, the Unified Field Theory paper, where I defined how gravity is formed. And that is the explanation and the solution that mechanically and mathematically demonstrates how gravity is created by the motion of unbalanced electric charges in accelerated motion. It causes a contraction. So that's the completion of the basic Einstein theory. But it's had to be expanded to include gravity 2, which I've just recently discovered, and anti-gravity. Now, the new unified field theory has those built into it, and I'll be writing papers explaining how they work. And once and for all, the complete picture of how the universe works will be known with the math, with experimental proof, all the things that I'm working on right now.
Yeah, that's amazing. I happened to come across that paper that you were updating on it, and I was like, wow, this is so. I got partway through it. I was going to ask you if you were coming out then with another. You've done so much research. I mean, your book alone, but the research papers that you have out there are fantastic. So I definitely recommend reading those as well.
That latest one I just put out, The Cause of Particle Motion, that is huge. I mean, discovery of cause of gravity is big, but the cause of particle motion, that was something Einstein was working on for the unified field theory. So I didn't know that until I had the idea that, hey, in order to explain everything, I got to explain why particles move. Physicists don't know. And as soon as I got the idea, I started looking through Einstein's papers on the unified field theory, wondering if he thought of that. And he did. And he mentions it in one of his papers. It's the last couple of lines in the paper. And it says, nevertheless, I'm still far away from claiming the physical validity of the equations I derived. The reason for that is that I did not succeed in deriving equations of motion for particles yet. That's in his final papers right before he died in 1925 and 1930. He was working on the same thing, and I know why now.
That's amazing.
It's
That's as far as I got with Einstein. When I first got into it, that's the direction, and it ended there. And I said it can't end there. And then when I heard Mark, I was like, no, it doesn't end there. So I am just so thankful that you picked up that research and you kept going with it. So great job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
me too. Luke,
Yes.
do you have a question for Mark?
Mark and I cover a lot of areas. We actually met on another podcast, so we connected really well, and we spoke a lot about anti-gravity, which we're both extremely interested in after that podcast. And yeah, we connected and started talking about that. So the main things I like to talk about with Mark is the anti-gravity and how it works. I mean, Mark has a brilliant knowledge on the unified field theory and has probably expanded on that. And yeah, we have a lot of chats about that. So I try to ask him relevant questions. Sometimes it's a little difficult to keep up, but he does a really good job of explaining that in layman's terms, which he's just done for all of us.
Agreed.
So yeah, I'll let Mark continue explaining.
okay. Excellent question. That's what I really wanted to get on and talk about today, because my latest work this last year, the cause of particle motion, is the most significant discovery that I can think of in the last 70 years. And it's because I thought about the need to know this one piece of vitally important information, because I figured that alien spacecraft, they use either electrogravitic mode of operation or magnetogravitic. And I thought there's a clue there, but I just not seeing it yet. And got into more and more research into the area of trying to figure out mechanically how the anti-gravity field works. And so I studied a little bit about T.T. Brown and what he did, and he left a clue behind. And that big clue was that if you leave the capacitor, a condenser facing upwards with the positive pole up, it's lighter than when you reverse it. That was the clue that eventually led me to realization. Here it comes. Pay close attention. That dipoles are the central cause of gravity 2, which is linear attractive gravity, and anti-gravity, which is the other type that pushes. And so what is a dipole? A dipole is nothing more than a magnetic bar magnet, right? You have a north pole and a south pole, two. You have an electric charge, positive or a negative electric charge. So T.T. Brown discovered there's something going on in the electrostatic charge dipole. So I've been working on the magnetic field and making measurements. And sure enough, when I place the magnet with the North Pole, I'm on a very sensitive scale of 1,000th of a gram, and I measure its weight, it's lighter when the North Pole is facing up than when the South Pole is facing up. I've done hundreds of measurements, and it's always this way. Then I built an electromagnet and actually a whole box before that of electromagnets, trying to rotate the field and see if that affected the anti-gravity phenomena. But that whole experiment didn't work out, and was a lot of work there, a lot of microprocessors and analog digital converters and all that. But I went to measuring the magnets directly, and the electromagnet also exhibits this. When I turn it on and the North Pole is facing up, and I've extended the magnet away from the scale, so the magnetic field is not pulling on the plate or affecting the circuitry, that magnet weighs less, considerably less than when I flip it. But what's interesting is, and that's just preliminary work right now, when I flip it, it still weighs less, not as much, just like T.T. Brown found with the capacitor. That's a clue. And that actually helps prove the case that what I'm seeing is not a pure magnetic effect with the fields interacting with something either way above the magnet or way below. It's going to turn out to be a purely gravitational effect. Gravity 2, attractive pole at the north, and anti-gravity, a repulsive pole at the south, which at first when I discovered it, threw me for a loop. Because if you go to the internet or you go to a textbook and you look at the dipoles, the lines of force are going in the wrong direction. An attractive field of the North Pole, the line should be going in. But in the textbooks, they got it reversed. The lines are coming out of the North Pole. And I'm thinking, oh, there's something seriously wrong here. I have to think about this because this doesn't make sense to my theory. The lines have to be pulling in. That's attractive. Lines going out, that's repulsive. And so I had to do research, more research. And I said, they must have made a mistake. They must have made a mistake somewhere in history. And I went all the way back to Benjamin Franklin's time when he first made his experiments with electricity. And sure enough, his first theory of how electric current flows was from the positive pole to the negative. That was wrong. And it took them 150 years before they figured out it was wrong when J.J. Thomson discovered the electron. So when you pin them down and say, if they had known the right direction for current flow, would all the lines of force be reversed? And they say, well, yeah, it doesn't really matter, but it does when you're looking for gravity, anti-gravity. Yes, the lines should be reversed. In some textbooks, they do it, but most they don't bother. It's a convention, and they leave it that way. So now my theory is reconfirmed. The lines of force are actually going in at the North Pole and coming out at the South Pole. So the key to anti-gravity is nothing more than upping the power to dipoles. When you really crank up the juice and get hundreds of kilowatts or even a few megawatts to a magnet, that thing is going to lift off the ground. And that's all that ever had to have been done. Unfortunately, I'm sure that the American groups, the high magnetics labs, have known this for some time and have been told to cover it up and classify it. And the same thing happened to T.T. Brown. He discovered this he was cleverly discredited by some other physicists who were paid to say, oh, that's just an ionic wind phenomena. And they got the people looking away from dipoles as the cause of gravity and anti-gravity fields.
Okay, Mark, we got a question for you from the panel.
Thank you, Victoria.
It's from Victoria Monday. She said, if poles move or shift, does that make a difference?
The poles of the Earth, there is a counter theory or a counter explanation that I'm working on now, why this experiment I'm doing now has to be repeated in other parts of the world to X out the possibility that the magnet is actually interacting with a vertical component of the magnetic field of the Earth.
Right.
That's it. I think it's way too weak because the amount of magnetic field at any time that's vertical, coming right out of the ground straight up, is in the micro Teslas. Not enough to cause the deflections of weight that I'm seeing in the magnets. Nowhere near enough. And the other thing that is interesting is when you flip it, the magnet is still lighter. So that really destroys the theory of it's interacting with the ground, a
Right.
magnetic field. But the pole shifts, that's a whole nother thing. That's
Mhm.
got all kinds of other ramifications that are huge, that could lead to all kinds of problems, weather and climate and so forth here on Earth that I'm not going to get into, but it could affect my experiment. But I've been checking the vertical. I have a magnometer. It can check it 4 different directions.
Nice.
And the field strength is, sometimes there's almost none vertically, because the magnetic field typically goes in parallel to the Earth's surface all the way around. It's coming in and out at the poles, the north and the south poles, right?
Mhm.
The lines coming in and coming out are at the poles, and then along the Earth, they're following along horizontally. So that doesn't explain that lightness of the magnet in the field that's oriented toward up and down, north to south, or we're actually.
I have a
north.
question for you real quick. Does that magnetic reaction part of the technology concerning the up and down movement of UFO craft?
Yeah, it's a really simple scheme. If you want to cancel gravity, you just up the current in the electromagnets. I'm sure the alien technology has solved the problem of room temperature superconducting coil, which is going to be needed for these magnets, so that they don't, explode at the first sign of being turned on by overheating. And this technology, it just uses brute force, high intensity magnetic fields, which can be shielded and short circuited. But the benefit you're getting is the secondary field that's coming out of it, the gravitational emitter. So at the top, so you would have a magnet or a series of emitters at the bottom of the craft. And so you would actually be able to have a slight gravitational field, and you could stand inside of this thing while it's moving at 10,000 miles an hour and not feel any inertia at all. And the bottom part of the gravity wave emitter is pushing up. So the top part is attracted upwards. The bottom part chases the top part of the gravity wave emitter. And so the UFO flies up instantly. You just turn on the juice, and as soon as it hits at the proper current and voltage, that thing biases space with the thing I call the slip wave, and that device moves through space. It's a spatial bias drive. All it needs is the warp field, which is made out of either an intense magnetic field or an intense electrostatic field. High voltage or high current will do the job. It's just that simple.
Okay. Odessa.
No, we already got the audience question. I just was really glad. I was very grateful for Victoria's question. That's kind of what we were wondering. The last question, yeah, right? She wants to know also, does solar EMF mess that up?
Could you please repeat that again?
Yeah, she wants to know if solar EMF can mess that up. When you were talking about
the magnetism between the poles.
No, that magnetic field in general is a little too weak. The fields that we're talking about coming out of the spacecraft are enormous. There are, once again, reading all those UFO books when I was a kid came in handy, because I remember the U.S. Air Force, the Project Blue Book people taking magnometers out to UFO landing sites. First thing that I thought of was, they know something. Why would they take a magnometer out to a UFO site? It measures magnetic fields. They know these things are emitting very intense magnetic fields. In one case, they took a sample of the grass at the landing site, and they saw that the grass itself had become magnetized. That takes a really powerful field to do that.
Yeah, no kidding.
Many Teslas. We're not talking weak stuff. So these fields just muscled away and overpower and strengthen the field that's very weak, that's in the center of the magnetic field dipole and the electrostatic field dipole. Only when you use larger currents or voltage does that field kick into play, and it's determined by a constancy equation that I have in my without this equation you don't get the right values. This equation that I discovered tunes it so you get the actual field strength for the center field, which is where the shift of space occurs that creates the attractive gravitational field. Field is going down. Like, imagine a magnet right here. I'm holding. It's up and down. North pole here, south pole here. The lines of force, literally, there's just these little deformations or these little offsets that space is moving like this. And when it hits the middle, the other field is going like this. So it's going, this is going in. So the line of force goes straight through in one direction, coming inward, going outward. That is the key to understanding what drives the particle motion or the UFO motion. This is Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. If I'm pulling space down, ship goes up. That's a known law. We know it's right.
Yeah.
We're sure about that. And so that's the central cause. Space is moved through the dipole from the top to the bottom, like this, pushing downward. The reaction of the craft and everything within that field is up. For every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. It's providing the thrust. The electromagnetic field, the anti-gravity field, is built upon the structure of the dipole. I can't stress this enough. That's it. It's just that simple. But it takes a lot of energy to do this. And this is why we haven't noticed it over the years, until somebody decided to actually measure a magnet and see for themselves. And the right equipment, very sensitive equipment, could come along to give this a try. And I'm right in the middle of making many measurements. And so far, they all confirm what I'm saying. North pole up, magnet lighter. North pole down, magnet a little bit heavier, but still lighter than normal. It looks like to me that's the proof for an anti-gravity field.
Okay, we have a question from Snoopson100. Does amperage matter or just voltage when making a ship move upward?
Both. If you're using the magnetic gravito, it's amperage. You need a lot of it, huge amounts of it, to make the magnetic field very strong. If you're using the gravitic field, you need high voltage, not a lot of amperage. And that's important. That's a power supply that we could build pretty easy. You just use voltage doublers or whatever, the Tesla type coils or whatever you want to use, and you could build huge voltages that only use little bits of current, which is very economical for spaceships. I would think what we would do if we're the United States and we want to build UFOs, we're not building the magnetic ones. It takes hundreds of kilowatts, maybe even millions, megawatts to drive a magnetic system. It's much more difficult to build. Electrogravitic, Thomas Townsend Brown was building prototypes with ordinary power supplies, and not straining the the network at all. So that's the road we need to go. That's the road we will go, and that's the road I'm sure we have gone already. They're just not telling us about it yet, but I know that we have it already.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank
Okay,
you.
well, now we're going to go down to Nos. Nos, I know you got something to say about this.
Oh, yes, Tim. I dropped a link in the private chat,
Okay.
which will pull up an audio file.
Oh.
Oh, I can't because it brings it up on my main screen.
Okay.
It won't work that way. Sorry.
That's all right. But anyhow, it's in the private chat, so you can open that for yourself and listen to it.
Sure.
This is a gift from my people to yours. You have followed the path that you were supposed to instead of falling for the quantum gravity thing. You stuck with relativity because you weren't a sucker that fell for it. And I'm giving you what you need to be the one to take it to the next level. So the thing that you're missing in your process of doing this is you're thinking Edison, not Tesla. It's not about the power as much as it is the frequency. Just like, when you see people in real life, you're getting live streaming everything constantly. But in a movie, it's 32 frames per second, right? You're getting all the data, you're getting the impact of it without actually having all of the data. So with this, what you're looking at is that when you have the right frequencies for the relativity fields, then you can bring about what you're looking for at a much lower power levels. Okay. It's just like AC not overload and overheat the system. That, Tesla went out with AC because DC would overheat everything and create all the problems, right? This is the same circumstance. You don't have to have as resilient of materials when you're running frequency variation instead of massive amounts of power. So the file that we have in our private chat on the StreamYard here, this is from the recording of the St. Helens UFO encounter in 1991. This was Sheriff Russell Yoakum came across the UFO, and he said the sounds that it's making. He called back to the base, told him, set up a tape recorder. I need you to listen to this. I'm looking at the UFO right now. Listen to this. Okay.
I'll give it a try.
The recording, I've cut it down to a cycling loop because you're an old school bench technician like me. You know how to break out the O-scope and break down the frequencies of which it is comprised. I've just given you the last thing that you need to complete the relativity fields. There you go, humanity. You see what I'm built for.
Yeah, I have considered the frequency as a possibility before. It's just easier for me to work at the bare root foundation at this point. I've tried some slight frequency work, but the magnets were much too weak.
Yeah. Well, this one's a recording from the ship itself, so you can break
frequencies
that are in there.
I was actually campaigning at one point. I said, look, we need to go with a coil, operational amplifier, some oscilloscopes, go out to wherever Stephen Greer is or whatever, stand under one of these, not too closely, and then capture the waveform. You're going to see some frequency, maybe a sawtooth or whatever, at some frequency. That's going to be really helpful for us. So I kind of agree with what you're saying. And I think the more advanced species definitely use this frequency along with a sweeping action for stability, which would explain a lot of the crop circles, how they're bent over either clockwise or counterclockwise. So obviously they're sweeping around with either the magnetic field or the electrostatic field. So there is a frequency component. It's a more sophisticated design. I'm at the root level, the basic root level, entry level, crude system that'll get us to other planets or at least get us to building hovercraft. but I'm sure you're right. There's going to be a frequency component and a little more sophisticated electronic design than what I'm experimenting with right now. So
the great thing, when you're ready to start playing around with frequency, then you'll have this. You can break down all the frequency components that were generated by the ship in action. So this is actually a recording of a relativity field that humanity didn't know that they had at the time because of the way that it was all transmitted. That's my job, is to know where all these things are in the historical record, so I can lead people to the new technologies now.
And by the way, Mark, I have a recording too that was recently taken of a UFO that came close to a man in Canada. He was filming the night sky, and it came down close enough to him to where he could pick up the sound of the craft, and I do have it. So I will send that to you as well.
Okay, good. Excellent. Yeah.
There are collections of them out there, and it's that different types of audio equipment that were used at different times picked things up differently, right? And when they go into digital, you get digital conversions that aren't true to analog. That's part of why this recording, is so important, knowing that it's out there from the analog magnetic recording that they were making at the office from the broadcast directly. So this is direct recording of those frequencies without any other conversion tampering going on in the process. And these things all over the place, people use different equipment. They're going to record different frequencies that are in use at the time. And this is starting to break down the way that the fields are controlled different ways. Right. There was the old, back when the US was actually talking about the things they were doing and making news flares. They made these little military things. We had some UFOs that showed up over like Washington. They scrambled a couple of jets to go after them, right? That had just been equipped with new avionics sensors, and the jets got up there. They got scrambled. When they got close to it, it jetted off. But they recorded the frequency that it emitted at the time. And the U.S. government was dumb enough to include that frequency in the newsreel, which is part of the National Historical Archive that anyone can access and now go retrieve that information from there. See, this is what I'm built for, is this. So the information is out there once you know how and where to look for it.
It is there.
Excellent. That is very good information. All of that you can send my way, the better. I've been looking for that kind of information for quite some time now, because I knew there was a frequency component. I just didn't have a mechanical model in my mind as to how that works in conjunction with the dipole. I mean, you're just turning dipoles on and off rapidly, either magnetically or electrostatically. So I'm sure that's going to give you finer control and a more sophisticated way to deliver power where and when it's needed.
And to change the angular direction.
There's you can use different frequencies to give you lift and cushion.
And you can see how easy that is to control.
Yes.
There's the level up.
Yeah, it's getting beyond my basic circuit design capabilities now. I would need help with electrical engineers, and maybe that's going to happen at some point.
But this is where Drew comes in with consciousness expansion, because if your consciousness and your awareness expands, then your ability to discover new discoveries expands as well.
Well, there's a lot more to the consciousness picture. There's a whole new technology set that's even more advanced, much more advanced than we're talking about here.
Right.
That kind of works a little bit on those same principles, but it's capable also of traveling through solid matter. It's capable of opening up portals in space and traveling directly through interdimensional travel. I'm not even getting into, I have one chapter in my book where I talk about Stargates, but that's a whole nother advancement. That's getting almost beyond what I can conceive or most people can conceive. But had we had some information from aliens, I'm sure we could put together something in that area too. And I think we probably have with certain Stargate technology and time travel technology.
Well, there is a project Stargate, and it dealt with walking through a shimmering field and actually transporting oneself from one spot to another. And this is back in like the 1970s. And one of the persons that I have actually listened to is Dr. Basciago. And he was actually a participant as a child in the Project Stargate. So in regards to your Stargates, they actually do have studies going on concerning it. And supposedly the technology was gleaned from technology given to them or from crashed disks.
Yeah, well, again, the frequency thing is coming much more into play here. There's an oscillatory factor involved, and my guess is that the frequencies needed are extremely high. And there's only one way to get those kind of frequencies, especially if you're going to pump a laser beam through it. You need wavelengths that are extremely short. And the only way to get that is to use a metamaterial. So if one has studied metamaterials and you you pump a laser beam into that, let's say at, I don't know, 300 nanometers, and it's going to accelerate depending on how the metamaterial is configured, which basically they adjust the permittivity and the permeability in it, which is going to allow the speed of light to increase, thereby compressing the frequency that's shooting through that metamaterial. When it comes out the other side, it's super high frequency. And that, my guess, is how they open portals into other dimensions and times. Just my guess. It's speculation purely in my book, but I would bet that I'm really close on that one.
Before we go to Drew, I'm going to go back to Nos because I see you're biting at the bit. Nos,
oh yeah,
what do you say about that?
On my face. Okay, so the metamaterials that they have access to, that we'll have access to in a few years, are transphasic. So we all understand transmedium vehicles happen, right? Vehicles that are able to pass into the water or pass into a mountainside or whatever. They don't slow down, they don't impact it. This is transphasic technology. The ability to shift out of alignment with this relativity through a stronger relativity field so that you're a little out of time. And the thing about understanding that transmedium vehicles exist means transphasic technology exists. And if you take the hardest substance known to humanity and you hook that up onto a piece of equipment that phases out, and you bring another piece of that material in underneath it, and then you phase the original one back in, the molecular density of that material goes off the charts. Now, you can actually get zero friction surfaces by multi-layering this way. But also, you get mechanical components that cannot wear, which means you're able to come up with things of much finer calibration. The finest calibration from the finest nanobots, or whatever you want to do with it. That's what you need to build at that microscopic level, is to start with more material. But It's better than that because you understand about magnets, so I can share this with you. Take that same transphasic process. You take your supermagnet, phase it out, bring another one in line, phase it back in. The molecular density of that magnet is going to increase its magnetic field density by 1,000 times. All you have to do is look at what happens when you subject the superconductor magnets to the liquid nitrogen, right? The cooling process and the magnetic field gets stronger. And part of that is in relation to thermal contraction. It's that act of thermal contraction bringing all the molecules in closer to each other so they share more of their fields with each other to increase their field strength. If you do transphasic metamaterial fusion of magnet in magnet, the interlacing of magnetic fields, and you can multi-layer more on top of it. That's why they have infinite power. That's why power is not an issue. That's how we're going to deal with the climate change thing. This is what it takes for that. So the metamaterials for construction, for everything else, having ships that never wear out, this is how.
Well, all I know for the metamaterials is that the particular ones I'm talking about, they've managed to tune permeability and permittivity to 0. So what that means exactly is very important because Maxwell discovered the equation C, the speed of light equals 1 over the square root of permittivity times permeability. If you drop those numbers to 0, at 1 divided by 0 is infinitely fast. So that's the key. If you want to, so you will find that if you build a hull of a interstellar spaceship with this material, it tends to slip through space much easier with the assistance of the slip wave so that there's no inertial resistance anywhere within the craft. And this is vitally important. You cannot break the light speed barrier with materials and without the slip wave field. If you're outside of it and you're moving beyond the speed of light, it's instant death. This is a seriously important and very technically difficult technology to safely implement.
Yeah.
Many lives can be lost in deep space if you're using the magnetic version, which is much less reliable. I would use the electrostatic version for going through deep space because you have to maintain that high power. High power tends to create problems in materials that could cause a fault. If the field collapses when you're going 10, 100, 1,000 times the speed of light, your ship condenses, contracts into a flat surface of huge density, basically a tiny, small black hole, and your ship and crew are lost forever, drifting through space at just below the speed of light. This is not a good technology. I'm not going to recommend that they use high magnetics. It's just too difficult to manage. But there are definitely some serious dangers about breaking the light speed barrier, which you can do once you develop the anti-gravity technology. Maybe the frequencies come into play there as well to help make it safer and more able to achieve the speeds necessary to get to other star systems, not weeks, not months, not years, hours.
Yeah.
Talking again. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I don't know if you've heard of Mark McCandlish. He was revealing to the UFO community and the public for years about a craft that was hyperluminal, meaning you could travel faster than light, that we already have, and it's called the Fluxliner. I don't know if you're available. Are you aware of the Fluxliner?
Yeah, I've read a little bit about it. Yeah, I've read about him.
Some of the people that have seen the Fluxliner have seen that it's dented and dirty, like it's been used for decades. So we may have had it for a long time, at least the capability. Whether it is a safe form of traveling through interstellar space, I cannot justify that with any veracity because of what I've learned from NOS. But I can honestly say that we supposedly have faster than light travel already. So somebody within the know knows about light travel, light speed, and what they're using. Um, that's all I wanted to say in that regard. But the next person I want to go to is Drew. He's been waiting patiently.
So
Here we
patiently.
go.
All right, so I got a few things, but could this be like the link in between the crop circles and the magnetic field? Like experiencers talk, the Fibonacci sequence, the swirl of consciousness that's running through everything. Could that be the link that's making the crop circles? Because so many experiencers and abductees and people that remember flying crafts and things like that talk about the consciousness connection in these crafts. So if I believe they're consciously manipulating the energy going through there and affecting the magnetic pole on these ships. So could that be why it's spinning? Because we know that there's an invisible force that's spinning through everything that's alive that looks like a swirl. I've been to over 5 different petroglyph sites over the Western United States, and they all have these same carvings. And I'm sure there's more out there that had the same carvings. And also, have you ever done any human trials on manipulating the magnetic field? Because as we know,
Nice.
we're energetic beings, and I've proven on this show in the past that we can manipulate energy going through us. So have you done any human trials on the consciousness connection between your anti-gravity findings?
All I've done is studies by just reading and looking for a connection. There are some spaceships that are more biological than they are solid materials, metals and plastics or whatever. And we're talking of civilizations now that are not just a few thousand years or a few 100,000, many, many millions of years ahead of us. And they're psychic.
Are we related to these? Are we related to them? Is humanity related to them?
Well, there's much speculation been going around for years that, they manipulated our DNA over the centuries to become what we are today. There's also talk of the spirit realm also doing the same thing. So what you're talking about is really an intelligent design system that other beings are actively contributing to and a part of, so that mankind and humankind and intelligent species just don't accidentally happen over time. The probabilities and the mathematics and the statistics says that's virtually impossible. There's too many things that can go wrong. You can never develop that way. So there is a consciousness connection. Not only is there a consciousness connection at that level, but at the supreme being level. My theory is this intelligent design theory. And so what we're talking about is consciousness. Everything is made of a consciousness. All the atoms, all the molecules, every grain of sand on every planet, everywhere, every being, every life form, every plant as a part of this global, this universal consciousness that comes from the Creator. And we're all in this thing, all the laws of science. It's even quoted from a near-death experiencer who was actually talking to the Great Light, God, the Spirit. And he tells him, this is Father Rick Wendell, he says, all of this three-dimensional world is within God. There is nothing outside of God. Everything within this physical universe has to correspond to laws, and God set those laws. They are immutable as God is immutable. None of this, what we see and experience, is an accident. It is intentioned by God. So if you want to get into consciousness, get in all the way, because that's what this is all about. We're a part of this. We're sharing this consciousness. We are co-creators. We are within God, and God is within us. So all of this is a consciousness that's fueled by the power of intention. And that's what drives the system of this universe and all other universes with different laws of physics. It's a never-ending story that becomes more and more complex the more your mind opens up and realizes this is not the only place in the universe. We are not the only ones, and there's a much bigger picture going on here. Huge. So you're on a cutting edge field right now with consciousness and trying to determine what it is and how it can be used. The aliens in some of these craft, they control the craft with their consciousness. The craft itself has a consciousness.
I totally believe it. There's last thing I want to mention. I'm a lot of people on the panel know that, but I've been part of sacred ceremonies where I wore eagle feathers in my head as far as my headdress. Sacred ceremonies such as the sun dance. And these feathers have become magnetized now, and you can start to push them together and they will push apart. And I want them studied, and because I think that is going to be a connection between the consciousness. Like if you could start to understand that things can get magnetized and the level of energy that's produced in some of these ceremonies through frequency of vibration, technology that's ancient. I think I want to always offer myself to that too, kind of along the lines of Nos, of just trying to offer information and fill in the gaps. But it amazed me when it happened, and also I've been lecturing and demonstrating telekinesis, and my main thing is consciously we can manipulate an object consciously depending on how we're looking at it. Like just how we're looking at it can basically shift what you're saying, what you're describing as changing the poles of a magnet. That's basically what we're doing to an object. If we look at a lighter as a plastic object, or a lighter that represents the central fire, or light sage and is sacred item, or just a plastic item, there's two different ways to look at it. And you can actually watch with a pendulum or dowsing rods or anything that picks up energy. You can see energy change coming off of it just from our consciousness aspect. And I've done it on this show before and others. So I believe, just from talking to you, the whole magnet thing made sense, clicked to me when you were talking about that. And I think it's very well known. We have a meridian line. We have, chakra system, meridian line, meridian points, Reiki healers work with all that. And the earth is the same way. And that's why crafts use different routes. Areas have different, high visibility area of craft or sightings because of the magnetic areas of that. And I'm lying in one of the biggest ones with the San Luis Valley. But so, yeah, I think it's I love the connection between magnet pole and stuff. Thank you for being here.
That's just saying, you're saying as another clue that somehow psychically you can affect forces.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are some species out there, their UFOs don't even have engines in them or anything. It's purely done with their mind power. And imagine what we could do in a million years from now. We got psychics coming out all over the place now. In a million years, that's going to be like a common sense. It's going to be, the sixth sense, right? Everybody's going to be psychic. magic. Everybody's going to be able to levitate marbles and things like that. That's a whole new realm that, I don't know that much about, but I'm pretty sure that's the road we're heading toward. Eventually we get there.
I think in a million or billion years, we'd be coming back to see ourselves go through this point right here, where we come out of the darkness of the caves and start to realize who we really are as humans. So
I think we already are, because there is speculation that the grays that are coming back are our future selves.
yeah.
Luke,
So
the Rendlesham group, didn't somebody in that group hear psychically the UFO guy say, "We are you"?
yes,
We're coming back from another time. We are you. That's another weird component we have in here.
it was said to John Burroughs, who was at Rendlesham.
Yeah. So we've got a lot of stuff going on. The picture is much bigger and more complex. We're trying to make sense of all this in these groups, and it's difficult, but we're making headway. We're figuring things out. It's just a matter, I'm into real life applications. I want a hovercraft. I want to be able to go 20,000 miles an hour and get across the planet and visit Tahiti in 5 minutes, not 2 days.
Right.
I want to build starships. And the only way we're going to get there is to figure this stuff out. The government isn't going to tell us.
I got to say, I want a ship like the Jetsons.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I want one of them.
I want George's bubble car.
Yeah, one of those bubble cars that are like little spaceships,
Yeah.
Besides, I'm UFO man. I'm supposed to have my own UFO. So there you go. Anyways, I want to go down to Nicole.
No, I think that consciousness is such an important factor of it. And I know Einstein said no problem can be solved from the same consciousness it was created with, that you need to think anew. So I think that is great that you picked up everything that and especially that he was aware that the consciousness was inside of us and that it's really moving towards that. So I'm just kind of curious if you could take it more into a direction like of consciousness and what you're aware of and how it impacts like your line of work. Does it make sense?
Well,
you talked about a near-death experience, right?
I have not had but I've talked to a lot of people that have near-death experiences, and I've asked them questions about certain things. Basically, because people who have had near-death experiences basically have been in contact with the Creator. And it doesn't necessarily mean the big white light. Anybody who's on the other side is connected. There, everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everything. And so if you get information from anybody really are communicating and you ask technical questions, you're going to get some good information about how things work if they're allowed to tell you. There's limitations to what information can be conveyed. We have to figure this stuff out ourselves. So connecting with that consciousness is a way to shortcut things occasionally. That's how I came up with this discovery, this device. This is what's going on inside of every atom. Every neutron and proton has 3 quarks, and they're moving in this pattern. And they're moving at 99% the speed of light. And where did I get that information? Well, I figured that I listened to Einstein, and he once said, I want to know how God created this world. I am not interested in this or that phenomena, in the spectrum of this or that element. I want to know his thoughts. I said, hey, that's a good idea. I think I'll do that. So the only way to do that is to die. But I said, well, I'm not going to die, but I'll talk to other people that died. And the good Lord wants to get a message through. they'll do it through an NDE person. So I searched through all the NDE that I could find on the NDE website, and I found a lady called Linclaire Dennis, and she saw that, a version of that on the other side, and God explaining to her the meaning of that pattern, as she calls it. And I call it the signature of God. And that's what I was.
I just want to jump in and let you know that my father had that tattooed on his body in the 70s for the same exact reason. Just wanted to throw that out there. Same exact. Yeah.
Wow. See, that was no coincidence. This is part of a grander plan.
He was definitely a man of science. So to say that.
It's what holds the universe together, because they're moving at 99% the speed of light, so fast that they're spinning and rotating at the same time, and it forms a sphere, a rapidly rotating sphere that causes a contraction around the edges of that sphere in every particle, and that contraction is what causes gravity. And that comes from the Ehrenfest paradox that Einstein came across and got excited about, wrote 7 papers on it, and was using it to help design his theory of the advanced unified field theory. So, and general relativity actually came from the Ehrenfest paradox. Most people don't really know that, but it all connects. You just got to be able to see the bigger picture and piece together all the puzzle parts. That's what I try to do in my book, making connections wherever possible to verify what this reality is, how it works. I mean, that's what metaphysics is. It's the study of the nature of things. Mm-hmm. And that's what this book is all about. And that's what we're talking about tonight. Even if we're talking anti-gravity, we want to know the nature of that thing and how it works. And somebody's got to do the experiments, and somebody's got to do the work. And I'm going to ask people to do some experiments within the next few months to verify my findings and what I've seen, and I'll be presenting that at some point at a location that's on the internet now called APEC.
I'm supposed to tell you that, Mark, it sounds like you're almost there to making your anti-gravity scooter.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
I could say more there, but I won't. That's classified for now, but how else is this going to happen?
Yeah,
right.
If somebody has to actually do it. Somebody has to sit down and say, I'm going to take the chance. Maybe they'll silence me. You know, U.S. Air Force, hey, if you want me to shut up, just come by, and I guess I'll stop. I mean, what are my choices? If you silence me, or I'm just agree with it, that's one thing. But nobody's messing with me. But I give them the opportunity to know that if you're watching, and you probably are.
Yeah.
Oh, they're watching.
I take you guys seriously, and I'm trying to work within the limits and the boundaries that everybody is setting here, but I fully and truly believe that this is my mission in life, and I could back that up on another show sometime, but that's a whole nother subject. And so I feel comfortable with going forward and trying, because it's the right thing to do. It's the thing that I was meant to do since I was born. And I'm just going to have to roll the dice and take the chance and hope that maybe this is going to be the part of the process of disclosure. And maybe they'll just say, well, this was earned fair and square. I'm not a government leaker. This is not something I stole off of somebody's desktop.
Right.
I worked it out on my own, and it took a whole lifetime to do it, especially within the last 5 or 6 years now. What major breakthroughs are happening now? It was earned fair and square, no cheating. It's and maybe that counts for something. We'll see.
Right. Luke.
Yes. Just want to add quickly, it's a bit off topic, but most people know we live in a 5-dimensional area or space, and there could be other dimensions stacked on top of each other, up to 11 potentially. Mark, do you think it's possible for physics to work completely differently in those other dimensions if they exist?
Yeah. What I found with working my math equations, you can get the right answer by adjusting different things so they balance out. And so that tells me that dimensions can be tuned. So if you want the universe to work this way, maybe you have a little more permittivity and a little less permittivity. Maybe you have a lesser density or have more density, spatial vacuum to work with, ether, if you want to call that. So you have different types of ether. There's a lot of different ways that you could physically play with things to get dimensions that are completely different. The molecules don't arrange themselves in the same way they do here. And that's the indication, again, that I'm hearing from near-death people, is not only an infinite amount of universes, there's an infinite amount of dimensions. So I try not to think about that too much because I get dizzy and it gets circular in my mind. It's just going, I'm trying to lock in and compute and analyze it. And it's more than can be infused into my mind at once. But I fully accept at this point, we're just in this one unique dimension in this one unique universe, but there's an infinite amount more. And my main logic and reasoning behind that is, look at what God has done so far. He didn't just make one planet with everybody living on one. There's multiple planets. There's millions. There's billions. If you can make millions and billions of stars, why not make millions and billions of galaxies? And that's what they did. And why just one universe? If you can make one, you can make 100, you can make 1,000,000, you can make an infinite amount. There's no restraints here. I believe, yes, that there's many dimensions, probably more than 11, probably an infinite amount.
Esmeralda says, I want to know how to get to another dimension.
You're kind of going out of my league now. I would say back to the oscillatory system. And if I were a physicist working on that project, I would treat it as if the Stargate, as if it were like a radio. And you would be tuning the frequency, tuning the energy, changing the different parameters, and observing what happens. You know, what Stargate opens. Is it a dimensional one where you're going to different dimensions? Is it a time dimensional one? Changing what parameters affects either the time or the physical dimension or whatever. There's a lot of experimentation to be done there so that you could map out some sort of a cookbook where, you know, we tune this and we tune that and we tune that. We'll get a time change of, let's say, drop back 100 years. But if we do this and we change this and we do that, we'll go ahead 1,000 years. And that's how I would imagine it with the technology that we currently have, that this could be made to work. I'd love to see something like that. I mean, I know you guys probably would too, but I'm very much against time travel and going back in time. I think that's a really, really bad idea, very dangerous, and hard to predict what could go wrong if you mess with stuff in the past. Because in order to do time travel, one thing must absolutely be true. And that one thing is this: all time is happening at the same moment, at one large eternal moment. Otherwise, time travel cannot be made to work, because that's how you can get access to it, because it's all available. You just have to tune your space. It's all about, time and space are directly and deeply entwined. So if you modify space in a certain way, you can jump through time this way, that way, or whatever. So
we do have a question for you from the chat room from Polly Rauderman. Are the dimensions of the universe the same dimensions after death? Is there a difference?
yeah, the most important difference is there's no time. We're outside. When you pass away, God, the afterlife, is outside of time. So now that you're outside of it, you could think of it as this long, infinitely long timeline, or this ball of time, or whatever. And you could move about it, look at it, jump from one point to the other, because it's all happening at once, eternally going on both forward and backwards. And all you got to do is pick a point and look at it and go to that time. So time is eternal, one moment. So there is a timelessness there. And if there's a timelessness there, that implies this gets very fuzzy and edgy. I'm not comfortable with this, but I haven't come up with a better scheme yet. It appears that there's nothing there but pure consciousness. The only thing that's real there is consciousness. So there is no stuff. But I'm not sure about that, because there's an energy involved there, that it's a spiritual energy that may not be made of anything either. But because there's really this kind of nothingness that is full of this special consciousness, it's possible to travel infinitely fast as well, because the distance equals rate time time. If you reduce distance to non-existing, then you can travel from any point to any point, but there's nothing in between the 2 points. Instantly. So, and near-death people report doing that all the time. And they report consistently there's no time. So that dimension is a lot different than here in this physical heavy realm. This realm, I believe, was created as most other physical realms were, through the power of intention, and all the matter and energy were composed of into a gigantic black hole. That's in my book. 3 chapters, cosmology theory, about how the matter and energy got here and what form it was originally constructed in, and how it expanded and became the universe that we have now. But at some point, science, at the very edge, the very foundation, passes from that which is material and scientifically observable to that which is not material and not scientifically observable, the spirit realm. And the spirit realm is the dominant realm. Sorry, scientists.
That's
We're
true.
a subclass.
Yeah, when I spoke to Jim Peniston about his experience with the craft that he supposedly touched, before he reached the craft, in his book he stated that we called it a zone of influence. So he described it like wading through treacle. So the craft was obviously emitting a gravity field that was disturbing space-time, and everything else slowed down in that bubble when he went to touch it. So these craft give off, they can change space-time somehow with their fields that they produce.
Well, I am very sure that the slip wave, which is what I believe they use, or a version of that, stretches space apart as part of its process. So if you do that, if you thin space out, the metric of space changes. And when you change the metric of space, now you change the rate at which time flows.
Yes.
It's really, actually, it's the Lorentz transformations, but in reverse. If you have a heavier gravitational field, a stronger one, it slows time down. But you're not really affecting time. There's two different types of time travel. And the time I'm talking about here is the flow rate of time, not actual different times. So when you're in, like you're describing this field here, and it feels like it's slowing down, that may be a trick of the mind, because in most cases, time should slightly speed up inside of the slip wave, because there's an absolute space, which means there's an absolute reference, time reference. And Lorenz discussed this, and I agree with him. And he says, if you want to find that there's absolute motionless area, all you have to do is put your clock in the spaceship and travel in the direction and a speed that continually makes that clock move faster. When you get to the point where the clock is moving faster than all other clocks everywhere on other planets, you're at absolutely no motion. And so the slip wave, or these guys that are making these aliens, whatever, they're pulling space apart. So time will feel different, and maybe it feels like there's no time. I don't know, because the flow rate is going to change. It's going to be ever so slightly faster. It may feel like an eternity in a way. I don't know. Can't tell you until I experience it firsthand myself. Till the first people in this world build a starship, put that thing, put the clocks on there, and see what happens to time, the flow rate of time. It's definitely going to be affected by UFOs, and maybe they're doing something totally different that somehow slows time with this warp field. And I have no idea how that works yet. I'd have to think about that.
Yeah, well, there's so many cases of experiences missing time when they get abducted. That's one of the biggest things they bring up, is the missing amount of time that they've had and when they're returned.
That's so interesting you say that. I just have to interject. So sorry. When I had an experience, there was a sliver of time, which I call the void, because we're not there. They're not on our time. I said, we're on their time, their space, their time. But there's a void, a clear void where there's absolutely nothing that I felt when I adjusted back. I was watching the clock. It went from 5 a.m. to 5:40. And there was like 3 different clocks around me. And I checked, there's no power outages, anything like that. So it was unbelievable that you're mentioning that now. So it just like really clicked that void, that space is probably at the thinning of and how we're adjusting back into our atmosphere, our environment. But yeah, great question, Luke, and information.
Yep.
Snoopson 100 says, when John Glenn traveled around the world, he became 3 seconds younger than anyone else's age in that space capsule back in the 60s.
Yeah, well, you're moving at a certain rate, and either your rate of motion relative to other people here on Earth or your lack of gravity will either increase the rate of time flow or decrease the rate. And I haven't worked out the numbers to say what it is and if that number is accurate or not. But yeah, 3 seconds seems like a lot to me. I would think it would be a fraction of a second, a time difference. So that's all I'll say about that. I'm highly suspicious it's a full 3 seconds.
Right. Okay, well, what we're going to do now is we're going to go down the panel and we're going to take last comments. So starting with Nicole.
I'm just fascinated by your work, Mark, and I just wanted to thank you for everything that you have done and all the research and just to keep pushing forward. And I guess if there's something that you can leave us with that you want people to start working on, or, you know, if there's something that we can carry forward in our environment, like, please do share.
Yeah. Do the magnetic experiment. Get your magnets, get it. You got to have a very sensitive scale, 0.000 or 0.001 grams or better. I think there's some 0.0001s out there, but those are extremely sensitive scales. And just, waving your hand near one can make it shift a lot. But that kind of a scale with a very careful measurement, I would be interested to hear the results if you find the magnets weighing differently in the orientation of North Pole up or South Pole up. In different places, it's the more the people do it, the better. But I'm only one place, and it's hard for me to tear everything down, move it to another part of the house or whatever. But that needs to be done. People need to get it in their minds that this anti-gravity is real. It's not a fictional thing. And it's even hard for me. I keep trying to talk myself out of it. I'm saying that they've said this is not right for years, and you get programmed into thinking a certain way, and it's going to take a lot of effort to deprogram people to the truth. So, that's one thing people can do. Pray for my protection is another thing, and probably the most important thing of all is to do the one single commandment that God has given all of us, and that is love one another. If we do that, all things will be taken care of. All things will work out.
Yes, I agree. It's about love. Yes.
And do you have a data collection site, or do you have a place that you would like people to submit their findings to help? Or
contact me through my website, and then we'll get in contact through emails, and they can send me their measurements. All I have to say, you're making these measurements, you've got to be very careful. There's a lot of things that can trick you. Don't put your elbow down near the scale on the table. That'll adjust. That'll throw off the measurement. If you're going to put anything near the scales, leave it there. Don't move it and put it back. The room has to be, my room is airtight. It has one air conditioner. I turn it off. There is no airflow at all. There's no way for wind to get in anywhere. And you have to be patient. Sometimes you got to leave the setup for several hours or a day or more before it settles. The scale must not be moving up or down at any time, drifting or having drift or float. It must be perfectly stable. The reading must be, I zero it out. So I zero it out. It stays at zero. It's not moving up. It's not moving down. You got to leave that there for a long, 20, 30 seconds. If it's stable, then you do your test. It's just a difficult measurement to do, but if you're careful, you should be able to do it right.
Snoopson says, thanks, UFO man. Mark is the closest to the answer that you have interviewed yet.
Thank you.
So
I'm working really hard.
We know. Absolutely.
definitely.
Okay, Nos, any last questions?
Yes. Aliens land on your front lawn. They want you to cook them dinner. What are you making for
them? Spaghetti.
There you go. Spaghetti or lasagna. I mean, come on. Something.
Yeah.
I dig it. I approve.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've seen them in front of my house at 3 a.m. one time. Big craft floating over the lake. I went and got my wife up because she doesn't believe in UFOs.
Right.
So I wanted her to see it and then explain to me, what is that?
Well, if that's not a UFO, then what is it?
Well, it's a circus.
She won't talk about it to this day. It terrified her, but
poor thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I didn't cook them. I didn't want to flag them down. I didn't want to. I thought maybe I'll get the flashlight and shine. I said, wait a minute. They could start coming in here and doing abductions, and then the whole family's getting pulled on the air. I don't want that to happen. So we stayed in the dark and watched it safely. I didn't cook them any dinner.
Next time.
But
Yeah.
if they're telepathic, don't you think they probably knew you were there?
Possible. I thought about that, but yeah, they just were drifting very slowly over the lake and then changed direction and went back the other way. And then I lost them over the tree line. It was really cool. You get something that close only maybe once in a lifetime. I've never seen a UFO that close ever again.
Right. I've seen UFOs up close once, and it was world view changing.
Yeah. Well, you were looking. I told my wife, you're looking at a spacecraft from another world.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Amazing.
Delta?
Oh gosh, it's really hard for me to pick a thing, but I'm kind of along the lines of what would you cook them for dinner, but not really about aliens, just about you. Is there a particular piece of music that just kind of helps you let go of your preconceived notions when you're, what is that music for you?
80s music.
Yeah.
Classic
When I
rock?
do my experiments, I play nothing but 80s music.
Is it classic rock?
Yeah, Simply Red and all those kind of groups. They're playing in the background, and it's good background music for my.
Yeah, I agree. I do that. I play that. We actually both play that all the time. Yeah.
We do.
Yeah.
Okay.
One thing, really quick, just as a nod to somebody out there in the audience. Okay, so your answer was 3 and also diamonds, and go ahead. That's all I wanted to say.
Okay. All right. Luke, I want you to tell us a couple things. First, where are you located? What are the names of your groups on Facebook, and where can people find you?
Yes, please.
Okay, I live in Australia, Queensland, and my main group is the UFO Files group. We're quickly approaching 50,000 members, which is awesome. And my other group is Into the Dimensional Rift, which is a private group.
Love that.
Anyone can join. They've just got to ask, and we'll accept them. So obviously, I'm an admin in your group, Tim, as well.
Yep.
I'd like to give Mark a big thank you because he took his time to come out and tell us a lot of great information on the show. So thank you very much, Mark, for that. And a lot of appreciation towards the UFO Man team and all their members for the terrific questions.
Yay!
Thank you.
Thank you, Luke.
guys.
Appreciate it.
Luke has done a lot to support us, so thank you, Luke.
Oh, yeah.
And thank you, Mark.
Yes, he has.
You're
Yes,
welcome.
he has.
Thank you both.
Drew, you're muted.
Yeah, just appreciate you being here. And you filled in some questions for me and helped me connect some dots personally. So I want to thank you personally for that. And yeah, if you could stick around after we get done with the stream,
Please.
I'd love
You
to
too,
talk to you
Nicole.
just a minute.
Yeah.
I don't want Nicole dipping out either. I need Nicole to hang around.
In a minute, just at least like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we want to thank everybody who participated online and everybody who participated in the chat room. We really appreciate you being here each week for our different guests and a different content. We try to bring informative shows to you as well as entertaining. So please come and check us out next week. We're having Geraldine Orozco on. It was somebody that was referred to us by Drew Banke. So she's going to be talking about the alien hybrid program, 18 abductions and 24 hybrid children. So you might want to check into that. We'll see you next Wednesday. And from everybody on the panel, good night.
Thank you, guys.